Greetings, Gordon Causey here, Gordy Canuck. Welcome to Act One, a Canadian take on news events. Uh, Today, this is Friday night. We are Friday, the 4th of July, Independence Day for my American friends. 4th of July. Andy, of course, the Wonder Dog, come on up, is here jumping all over me for her because she has trained me that I have to give her a treat at the start of every video, or at least at the start of all my live videos. We fix the background, but wait your turn. Wait your turn, Candy. I'm trying to fix my background. There we go. Make it look a little better. High production values and everything. All right. Sit. Lay down. Speak. Speak. All right. She's barking. You got a in good voice tonight. She got a bacon treat. I see I have someone has shown up. And you're welcome to fill the live chat. Let me put it onto live chat. I don't like to miss any of the messages being written up. I have my coffee. Wanted to share some news, go back kind of to how this channel really got started. I never published videos until on YouTube until late in the year 2020, during a time when we were, experiencing lockdowns and everything, and the world was shut down. And I remember my first videos were all about the very first videos I did. I was looking at the arrivals at Toronto's Pearson International Airport, and I was looking at all the planes coming in from all over the world, from Beijing, from Europe, from the United States. Hundreds of, it seemed 100 plus planes every day, probably hundreds of planes every day. International flights were coming into Toronto from all corners of the world at a time when Canadians were being told to stay home and stay safe. And it just struck me as contradictory. The contradictions of the COVID era were so big you could drive a truck through them at times. A small little hardware store would be forced to be closed, but a Home Depot, hundreds of people could be there. A little nail salon or, haircutting place, whatever, that they would be shut down. But Amazon warehouses in Toronto, of which I understand there are two or three Amazon fulfillment centers in the Toronto airport area. And mainstream media was reporting that there were literally hundreds of identified positive cases at Amazon's fulfillment centers, and yet they were allowed to stay open. And it just struck me as incredibly contradictory. Well, we can't shut down Amazon? Why not? Isn't it all about public health and safety? Likewise, what was declared essential and what was declared non-essential made no sense to me. The tobacco industry, the production, packaging, delivery, retailing of tobacco products was in the essential category because it's all about health. We have to get smokers their butts. We got to get smokers. We got to keep them. What do we call them? Cancer sticks. Oh, those are essential. But life-saving, heart surgeries and things, or life-saving cancer screening. No, we can't do that. Have a cigarette. That's essential. Cancer screening, that's too dangerous. Insanity. And full disclosure up front. So when the COVID vaccines were first authorized for use in Canada in December of 2020, in Canada, we called it an interim use authorization, meaning that the vaccines at that point were not approved, but they had said in the interim, we are going to allow their use. In the United States, it was called an emergency use authorization, basically saying, well, they're not approved. They haven't gone through, we have no long-term safety profile or anything, but we're going to approve them regardless because it's an emergency. Basically the same idea, just different wording between Canada and the US. And now it is being reported by Global News, which is as mainstream an outlet as you're going to find in my native Canada. They are reporting that vaccine injury claims are quote unquote surging. That is their own words, not just in Canada, but in the UK, in the US, in Australia. I'm going to be sharing the article with you. It's only a couple days old. And then a follow up article they did that actually gives some hard numbers to the number of people in Canada who are claiming to have been vaccine injured, forced to take the COVID vaccines, and are subsequently developing health issues that they claim are related to the COVID vaccines. To be safe, to be fair, and to be, fully above board, I am not a medical professional. I have no background in medical science. I do not consider myself to be scientifically illiterate. I have taken science courses at the post-secondary level, university level, but that does not qualify me to offer any opinion. And you take everything I say with a massive grain of salt and verify everything I say. I will include in the first comment to this all the links that I am going to share so that you can see the web pages for yourself. At any rate, just my own personal experience in December of 2020, I knew I was in the military at the time, the Canadian Armed Forces Communication Branch. I was working at a radar station communication center. And I knew in December of 2020, once the vaccines were authorized, that at some point I would be forced to get it. And I, at that point, was not willing to take that chance. That's the way I looked at it. I'm not taking the risk. Uh, I decided that I was going to wait a year or so. I knew that lots of people were anxious to get the shot, and I wanted to, within my own limited little sphere, see what the outcomes were. And so what I did, knowing that they would be forced, is that at some point I put in the Canadian Armed Forces has something called a voluntary release, a VR. And so I requested my release from the Canadian Armed Forces in December of 2020. It's a 6-month process to get out. It has to be approved. It has to go up the chain of command from my warrant to the major, from the major to the light colonel, from the colonel to the colonel, from the colonel to Ottawa. And the whole thing takes about 6 months. And my request for release was approved. Basically, I was getting old. I had plenty of reasons to leave early. I could have stayed until the age of 60. I'm coming up to that now. But I do have arthritic knees, um, health issues in the family, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm getting old. I have a young son. My knees are gone. Yeah, and I was given, go ahead, you can leave the forces. And then it was in August or September after I had left, my release was approved, and I left in June of 2021. And then my prognostication that they would be forced proved accurate. It was mandated that all Canadian Armed Forces members get the shot in August or September of 2021. But I was already out. Long-winded preamble, I know. And I'm sorry for that. Whatever. Not really. Let's look at what I'm talking about in the subject line of this about the surging number of claims. Again, this isn't me. This is Global News. So here I'm going to share my screen. Sure, I always do. Yeah, it's sharing. Article. So we have here vaccine injury programs elsewhere also face challenges, criticism. And this is just a day old, well, 2 days old. It was posted on July 2nd, updated yesterday, July 3rd, showing a picture of Margaret Keenan, 91, receiving her spring COVID-19 booster shot at the University Hospital Coventry back April 22nd, 2022 in Coventry, England. I guess they need a stock picture of something. I wonder if Margaret Keenan is even still alive. She was 91 back in 2022. Anyway, here's what it says. Canada's Vaccine Injury Support Program is not the only one of its kind facing major challenges. Similar efforts in the US, UK, and Australia have come under scrutiny for allegedly failing to support families. And here's the money quote amid surging applications. Applications for vaccine injuries are, as per global news, they are surging and with desperate pleas for help. I'm having trouble highlighting. There we go. The Australian government closed its new injury claim program and stopped accepting new applications all the way back, you know, 8, 9 months ago, September 30th, 2024, after complaints about how the applications were treated. Australia has reportedly paid out about $28.5 million Canadian in injury compensation, and the program has been widely criticized at home and by the global cable news outlet many will know, Sky News. One veteran Australian Liberal MP has begun publicly advocating in Parliament for the injured. Quote, some of them are so severely damaged. It's very distressing even to have these people face to face and speaking to them when you see some of them are so severely damaged, MP Russell Broadbent told Sky News. The UK program's administration costs were the equivalent, now this is administration, were the equivalent of $46 million Canadian as of January 2025. And that sum exceeds the reported 43.5 million spent on payouts. So they're spending more to administer the companies or the consultants that are administering these vaccine injury payments, that it's costing more to pay the consultants or the third party outfits than it is than the actual recipients, the people who are injured, are getting. Says that as of January 2025, more than 17,500 Britons or their families have made claims, but several told the BBC they felt like they had been airbrushed out of the pandemic. And that's merely the number of people who make claims. I openly question, are there people who are injured who are not making claims, who are told, oh, it had nothing to do with the vaccine, and they go, okay. Some Britons have also criticized their program as too slow to assess injury cases, with thresholds made too high to qualify and payouts too low for those who get them. Says the US government also faces a flood of claims, but most are being rejected. Data shows 13,836 people have filed COVID-19 injury claims under the US Health Resources and Services Administration Countermeasures Injury Compensation Program as of May 1, 2025. The countermeasures effort exists as a separate program from its vaccine injury system to compensate people hurt during national emergencies like COVID-19 when new vaccines or treatments are rolled out. US officials reported that of the 13,836 COVID-19 related countermeasures injuries claims that is received, that HRSA has issued a decision in 4,413 cases, with 4,338 claims being denied. To date, US officials have found only 75 claims eligible for compensation. The number of claims compensated totaled just 39, according to data disclosed on June 1. And the American program has been harshly criticized as well. And a U.S. congressional committee has warned that without major reforms, clearing the backlog in the countermeasures program may take almost 10 years. Yeah. Uh, That's pretty much the end of the article. The U.S. program states on its website that officials assessing the majority of COVID-19 countermeasure injury claims are still waiting for records and documentation to be submitted. So let's stop sharing. Eat Me, Nancy is here. And that, let me read. Yes, it is a surprise live stream. I just decided to do one because this really bugs me. This really annoys the heck out of me that people were mandated, forced in many cases to get the shot. They didn't want to. A lot of people didn't want to get the shots, but felt that they had no choice. A big reason was because, well, I have to work. I have to put food on the table. I've got to pay the mortgage, the rent. I got to put food or clothes on my kids' back. And if I don't get this, I can't work. My employer won't allow me to come into work. There were countless companies, and certainly government was a big part of it, that said, if you don't get the jab, you cannot work. And this was for something, a medical intervention that was under an interim or emergency use authorization that did not have a long-term safety profile whatsoever. There was no long-term data. And on top of that, as I'm going to go in further, they further destroyed the placebo groups, which makes determining any long-term health risks very difficult to assess. If you don't have a placebo group that's roughly the same size as the dosed group, then how do you make comparisons? If you see 500 cases of myocarditis in the dose group and you want to compare it to the placebo group, well, if there's no placebo group to compare it to, how do you know if the jab is causing myocarditis, pericarditis, and autoimmune conditions, et cetera, et cetera? So Max Power has also shown up, and he is writing Happy 4th of July. And again, I said that off the beginning to my American friends. Stay free. I agree with you there, Max. Max, I forget, are you down in the United States? Many will know that I spent 10 odd years growing up down there, New York, New Jersey, Oregon. Loved my time growing up in the United States. I recall fondly the 4th of July parades that were held in a little tiny town in northern New Jersey, Glen Rock, New Jersey, where I spent about 5 years growing up. Anyway, I wanted to bring up another article, and this is a follow-up to the one I just read. And again, this is from Global News, so it's not me talking. This is being news in Canada. Our media, the media. Yes, thank you. Max is out in the soon-to-be independent Republic nation of Edmonton, Alberta. I'm kidding. I actually don't think Alberta will ever separate, but that's another point in the news. This. What does it say here? The federal government has launched a compliance audit to determine if an Ottawa consulting if an Ottawa consulting company is mismanaging the Vaccine Injury Support Program, VISP, and Public Health Agency of Canada, PHAC, officials made a surprise visit to the firm's offices in mid-June, Global News has learned. Then they toot their own horn a bit. A 5-month-long Global News investigation of the Vaccine Injury Support Program triggered the audit and downtown Ottawa office visit by Public Health Agency of Canada officials to check the consulting firm's work managing thousands of vaccine injury claims filed by Canadians, according to a confidential source familiar with the matter. Staff from the Public Health Agency of Canada conducted a visit to Auxerro VISP offices in Ottawa on June 17. That was after Global started asking questions about program administration by its hired consultants and sent letters seeking comments. Ox Arrow's 5-year funding agreement with Public Health Agency of Canada is up for renewal next year, and the audit raises the possibility that the company could see a shorter contract extension or have it or not have it renewed at all if it does not pass the compliance audit. The government could also strengthen Oxero staffing and training requirements. The confidential source said that PHAC, Public Health Agency of Canada officials will continue to visit Oxero's VISP offices on short notice and in person to ensure that performance standards are met. Global News agreed not to identify the source because they are not authorized to speak publicly about the site visits or about the audit, though they are familiar with the details about them. Public Health Agency spokesman Mark Johnson confirmed the surprise June 17 visit by agency staff. Public Health Agency of Canada has initiated the process for a compliance audit of the Oxero administered VISP, Vaccine Injury Support Program. Oxero did not respond to an emailed request for comment about the audit and the site visit. The Vaccine Injury Support Program was created during the COVID-19 pandemic's early days. The effort was designed to support and compensate people who have been seriously and permanently injured by any Health Canada authorized vaccine administered in Canada on or after December 8, 2020. I guess that's the date, December 8, 2020. That's probably the date of the interim authorization where they allowed basically what an unapproved medical product, an unapproved pharmaceutical product to be used. And not only did they allow it to be used, they also required its use if you wanted to work, travel, all manner, if you wanted to be a functioning member of society. The federal government invited companies and nonprofits to submit proposals to administer the program in early 2021 and compete for a 5-year contribution agreement to fund the effort. Oxero vowed it had the people, processes, and tools to run the initiative with industry best practices, and Public Health Agency Canada subsequently picked Oxero. They won the bidding war. But the Global News investigation into the program, involving more than 30 interviews with current and former employees of Oxero and with injured claimants and their attorneys, uncovered complaints that the Vaccine Injury Support Program has failed to deliver on its promise of fair and timely access to financial report. Listen to this. Oxero they've been given $50.6 million in taxpayer money, and they've spent 33.7 million of that on administration. So not going to people who've been injured, that's just their administrative costs. While Canadians injured by the shots during the pandemic have received only 16.9 million. Public Health Agency of Canada and Oxero underestimated the number of injury claims that they would get. They were only predicting 40 per year and then up to 400 valid claims per year. So initially, 1,000 applications have been filed, and of those, 1,700 people, the majority, are still fundraise online, just they've never spoken to or met. That's their claim. Some said their applications were unfairly rejected by doctors they've never spoken to or met. Pfizer, you can find a PubMed article that details how Pfizer, and this is PubMed, National Institutes of Health, they were fined billions of dollars because of bribing medical officials, but bribing medical professionals, bribing doctors. Could that have played a role? I don't know. Despite decades of calls for a vaccine injury support program, the federal government cobbled it together during a pandemic. Part 2 of the investigation uncovered allegations that Oxero was unequipped to deliver fully on the program's mission and raised questions about why PHC chose this company over others. You have to wonder, do they have connections with Trudeau's old Liberal government, which is now run by Mark Carney? And then Global News revealed internal documents suggesting that this program fell short due to poor planning from the start. Anyway, that's enough of the article. I want to share one more. Let me end that. Let's see what's being written. And Max is hoping to remain Canadian. I think you will. I don't think Alberta will vote in favor of separation. Maybe get 30%, maybe 35%, but the overwhelming majority of Albertans are going to vote to stay in Canada. That's my prediction. Eat Me is writing, if I'm not mistaken, it was the second winner of the plan something. Here in Quebec, they passed a weird mandate that non-essential items couldn't be bought. Oh God, the insanity we went through. Same thing happened here in Ontario. You would go into a store and they'd put up yellow tape, line, do not cross lines around certain products. I was playing tennis in the summer. I wanted to get tennis balls, but you weren't allowed to buy tennis balls at the store. You could buy them from Amazon. Amazon, which had hundreds of cases at their fulfillment centers, they were allowed to deliver tennis balls. I don't use Amazon, so what I did is a neighbor was nice enough. He does use Amazon, and so I'm not, I say I don't buy anything online, and I don't personally, but I have relied on others to make purchases for me for things that I can't readily get. And that was the case with the tennis balls. Eric, a neighbor of mine, he bought me 4 or 5 cans of tennis balls so that I could go out and play tennis because they were non-essential. Oh, the insanity we went through. Max is writing, that sounds familiar to me too. I definitely remember non-essential businesses being forced to be closed. It was crazy what we went through. And it's kind of faded into the background noise, but I want to share some more articles because one thing that I am noticing, I work in a retail environment. I don't like to name my employer. After leaving the army, I did nothing for a year. And then about a year later, I started working in a retail environment. And one of the things that the place I work sells is gluten-free products. And I have noticed anecdotally, just through my own powers of observation, that the sale of gluten-free products has gone crazy. The number of people requesting every day. I have someone coming up. Where's your gluten-free section? Where's the gluten-free? And uh, why are people having to avoid gluten? Because of something called celiac disease or celiac. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. It's CELIAC, celiac or celiac disease. It is an autoimmune condition. Uh, and your body can no longer process gluten, and now you're forced to, whereas you can buy a loaf of bread for a couple bucks, $2, $3, $4, you can buy a loaf of bread, is a $2, $3, $4. But if you have an intolerance to gluten because of celiac disease, now you're going to get a little loaf of bread for $7, $8, $9. It's insane. The costs that are associated with celiac disease, and that is an autoimmune condition. And I'm not making any claims that the COVID vaccine causes celiac disease, but it has been reported widely that there is a link between the vaccines and autoimmune conditions. And celiac disease is an autoimmune condition. Trying to tread carefully here. I have something to share from the Journal of Gastroenterology, and I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing that right, the American Journal of Gastroenterology. I'm just going to pronounce it as best I can. That speaks about this. But before I go on, I'm just going to catch up on the chat. Eat Me is writing at Max that everything was open. It was during the wax mandate, to enter restaurants, cinemas, and the likes. Oh, I couldn't even go out to a restaurant on our anniversary. My wife, we celebrate our anniversary, and we couldn't go out to a restaurant. Fortunately, I found one in Kingston. It was called Jack Tuesdays Pub and Grill. Kelly Hale, the proprietor, uh, stayed open, and refused to ask people for their private medical information. He had a chair in the vestibule in the entrance area, and the chair had a sign on it and said, "This chair is for Ministry of Health, public health officials to check for medical history. And if the chair is empty, then you got nothing to worry about. Come on in." He was brilliant, and they hammered him, fined him, closed his business, took away his liquor license, all kind of things that it was heinous what they did to him. Uh, and then Max writes, should have guessed that something was strange when they were offering $100 gift cards for taking the jab here in Alberta, along, donuts, Krispy Kreme donuts. Some places it was a burger and fries. In Ontario here, they had carnival type atmosphere and free ice cream to kids. It was like the child catcher in the movie Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, what they were doing. Um, and Amy goes on to say that they just decided that some items were deemed non-essential in winter, such as winter coats. Hell, they even barred out. Yeah, and that's why I was talking about in our area. Same thing. They put up the yellow tape. Not allowed to buy these items. Stupid. Uh, And then Max is saying that certain businesses, like personal services, were forced to be closed in Alberta, such as barber, hairdresser, estheticians, etc. There was a gentleman named Alex Masters up in Peterborough, which is about an hour from where I live, and he was keeping his barber shop open. And I obviously don't have much need of a barber, but my young guy has a full head of hair, and he needed a haircut, so I booked him in at this gentleman's high-end. It was one of these retro places with the antique, barber chair, etcetera. I booked an appointment for my young guy, and God bless Alex Masters, the gentleman who owns the place, because he called me up, the day of the appointment to let me know not to come up, hour-long drive. He said that the public health officials in Peterborough had boarded up his place, and that if he tried to open that, they threatened to call Children's Aid and take his daughter away. That's how crazy things were. And we tend to forget. There's a tendency to want to think, oh, well, this was a bad dream. But for some Canadians and Americans, Brits, Australians, etc., it's not the dream. It's not a dream, it's continuing to the present day. If you've been injured by something that was caused by the jab, you were forced to get it, and they promised to have a program that if you get injured because of it, we're going to force you to get it. And then if you're injured, we'll have a program to support you. And what happens? The programs that support people, who's making all the money? The companies, the consulting firms like this Oxero, that more than half the money is going just to pay their administrative costs, like salaries. Crazy. Um, just reading Sharunian saying, hello, just came back from a temple. Very good. And Max, yeah, Eric is an awesome guy. He's also a brother in arms. The area I live in, there are a lot of current and former military members. Eric was in the Air Force. Amazing guy. And Sharunian saying something about upgrading to Windows 11 Pro. John 5 has shown up. Good to see you. And then Eat Me, or rather, yeah, Eat Me is saying that they were at the Bell Center. They would give you hot dogs. Come get your jab and get a hot dog. because it's all about health, and everyone knows that hot dogs are so healthy. Um, Eat Me has said this before and saying it again. They programmed the mass population to accept the unacceptable. Anyway, let me go on and share what I want to share. I talked about the fact that the placebo group was destroyed, and I don't want you to take my word for that. I want to share the article as National Public Radio, NPR, funded by the US federal government, although Trump has since cut off either all or a large degree of their funding. But they did an article talking about the fact how the studies are hampered. Um, Long-term study of COVID-19 vaccines hurt by placebo recipients getting immunized. And this is what I mean by the fact that they were um, destroyed. Tens of thousands of people who volunteered to be in the studies of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are still participating in follow-up research. But some key questions won't be easily answered. I have to question, will they even be answered at all? Because many, actually most of the people who had been in the placebo group now have taken the vaccine. So you don't have a placebo group. Um, they say this, NPR, they still say there's valuable information to be had in the planned 2-year follow-up. And that this motivated Karen Mott, a 56-year-old job counselor who stuck with the continuing study, but she was in the dosed group. I want to get to where it talks about okay, what happens to follow-up? This is how clinical trials work. Participants provide periodic nose swabs, saliva samples to see if they've been infected. They also give blood so scientists can better understand how the vaccine is providing protection. And also, they can determine if there are any long-term health consequences. And it says that Mott was one of about 650 volunteers, and I lost the article. Okay, there we go. Mott was one of about 650 volunteers who took the and they're calling it experimental vaccine at a company called Johnson C. County Clinical Trials. So Moderna would have hired this outfit, Johnson County Clinical Trials in Lexina, Kansas. And Dr. Carlos Fierro runs the study there. He says every participant was called back after the FDA authorized the vaccine, emergency use authorization. During that visit, we discussed the options, which included staying in the study without the vaccine, meaning staying part of the placebo group. And he said, amazingly, there were a couple of people who chose that. There were a couple people who chose to stay on just the placebo. And he suspects that these individuals were spooked by rumors about the vaccine. But everybody else who had the placebo shot went ahead and got the actual vaccine. So now Fierro has essentially no comparison group left for the ongoing study. And this is right out of NPR. There is no comparison group left for the ongoing study. And this is incredibly I have Eat Me saying that I went dark. Is it good now? Let me know. Hopefully not. But right there in that article, saying no comparison group left because they turned around and they offered the vaccine to everyone who had gotten the placebo. And so what happens is prior to the placebo groups being destroyed, if you had 20,000 people in the placebo group, 20,000 people in the dosed group, you might witness, I don't know, just as an example, oh my gosh, in the dosed group, people getting the actual Moderna mRNA, we have 800 cases of celiac disease popping up. Then what you want to do is you want to compare, okay, how many people in the placebo group have gotten celiac disease? We got 800 in the dose group. How many in the placebo group? And if it's in and around the same number, if it's about 800, then you say, okay, it's a pretty strong indication that it's not the vaccine. It's got to be something else out there in the environment because both groups are getting it at the same rate. The problem is if you have now 38,000 in the dosed group and only a couple thousand in the placebo group, you can't make an apples to apples comparison. And so now they can honestly say, and they do, they say there's no proven link between the emergence of autoimmune conditions and the COVID vaccine. And the reason there's no proven link is the mechanism by which we could prove a link, having a placebo group, we've destroyed it. There is no placebo group to compare it against. And so I have to wonder how many individuals are claiming that they were vaccine injured. And then the burden is on them. They now have to prove it. They have to prove that the vaccine caused your Guillain-Barré syndrome, your Bell's palsy, facial paralysis, your autoimmune condition, your lupus, your celiac, whatever it happens to be. And how can you prove it? And how do you prove it when we have companies like Pfizer that have been fined billions of dollars over the years for engaging in practices like bribing physicians? Bribing members of the medical community. Drive me crazy. And Amy is saying that I'm back. I'm not, I'm no longer, the screen has not gone dark anymore. And then I have just one more article to share. And again, this is the American Journal of Gastroenterology. And again, don't take my word on anything. I have to be careful. I have had videos taken down. Medical misinformation or whatever. I'm not providing any information. I'm just relaying what's being written by Global News, by NPR, National Public Radio, and now what is being, where is it? By the official journal of the American, the American Journal of Gastroenterology, if I'm pronouncing that right. Let me make sure it's sharing. All right, check this out. Now, this is old. I'm trying to find a date on it. Only tweeted by one. Anyway, intro. Vaccine-induced autoimmunity has been previously described with many protein subunit vaccines. Many mechanisms have been proposed, though it is largely thought to occur via molecular mimicry. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic that saw the rapid development and distribution of several new vaccines using novel technology, meaning new, unproven, uh, there are emerging reports of new onset autoimmune conditions following vaccination with mRNA-based vaccines. And then they look at one specific case. This is a case description and the methods. The patient is a 47-year-old woman with a history of iron deficiency anemia and atopic dermatitis. Her family history is notable for two children with biopsy-proven celiac disease, one of whom additionally has Graves' disease. She initially presented for an intermittent, oh, I love the language, pruritic lower extremity rash that developed after her second mRNA-based COVID-19 vaccine. Celiac serologies were negatives. She was gluten-free at the time, but her HLA-DQ2 haplotype was positive. Punch biopsy of her rash was notable for intra and subepidermal splitting with granular IgA deposition at the epidermal junction, consistent with dermatitis herpetiformis. Several months later, she received a booster, and shortly thereafter, she presented to emergency with acute palpitations, tremor, and diarrhea. TSH was undetectable with elevated free T4 and TSI consistent with primary hyperthyroidism. I guess that's something to do with the thyroid in setting of Graves' disease. She was started on treatment with oh, some of these names with some drug, methimazole and beta blockade. Due to ongoing evidence of malabsorption, she underwent upper endoscopy that was consistent with treated celiac disease, increased duodenal lymphocytes with preserved villus architecture, as well as atrophic gastritis and elevated IF antibodies suggestive of autoimmune gastritis. She later developed hemo, whatever, a colonoscopy, had evidence of chronic active proctitis, and in conjunction with the mildly elevated fecal calprotectin, she was additionally diagnosed with ulcerative proctitis and started on mesalamine with resolution of symptoms. Wow. And it's a very short article. Sorry, it's taking me so long to read, but this is the money, especially the last statement. Our case highlights a striking example of vaccine induced autoimmunity where the patient developed several new onset autoimmune conditions, particularly gastrointestinal disorders, upon receiving mRNA based vaccines. Now it says, given that only a small subset of patients, and I love terms like small. What is small? How many people is small? Give me a percentage. Um, experience this phenomenon. It suggests there may exist a genetic predisposition for autoimmunity triggered by vaccination. And then it says, and this is to me the money quote, our case underscores the need to use mRNA based vaccines with caution in patients at high risk for autoimmunity. And what's so annoying to me is that someone who was at high risk for developing autoimmune conditions consults with their doctor, and the doctor says, yeah, and then the government turns around and says, well, yeah, then you can't work, you can't travel, you can't be a participating, functioning member of society. The government superseded medical expertise under the guise of a mandate that proved to be completely pointless because, as we now know, the vaccines don't prevent infection or transmission. So you get vaccinated, you can still get the disease, you can still pass it on. So there's no public health benefit, and yet they mandated the garbage. And now we have a vaccine injuries program that is all it's doing is making probably what I assume is a liberal friendly consultant firm, Oxero, rich. And it's nuts. Uh, and Amy is giving me something of a warning, a little bit of a heads up. She's saying that YouTube doesn't care if it comes from official sources. Oh man, hopefully this doesn't go down. Uh, whale oils writing follow the science. Well, there isn't any, as discovered in the 2022 Ottawa 22 gathering. When asking Theresa Tam to provide it, she stayed silent. Our former chief medical officer of health, who at least had a background in public health. She had Theresa Tam at least had the educational background in pediatric medicine. Now she has been replaced by a woman who's a chemical engineer and has no medical background. But she's a good DEI hire because it looks like, well, she's overweight. I'm body shaming. She's overweight, and it looks like she's wearing the niqab or the hijab. So I'm guessing she's Islamic. So she's a woman from visible minority woman who's, overweight. So she probably ticks off 3 or 4 of the DEI boxes. Um, Max is writing, zero consistency with the media. First, you were a bad person if you wore a mask because you were hoarding masks that doctors needed, right? Then you were a horrible person for not wearing one. You'll never get one on my face again. And then Max goes on to say, first it came from bats, and any other explanation was falsely debunked. Uh, and that it came from that. I don't think we'll ever have a smoking gun proof. I don't think the Chinese will ever be forthcoming and transparent enough for a definitive link to that coronavirus lab in Wuhan, China. I don't think the smoking gun will ever come out, but like Dr. Luc Montagnier examined the virus and said that from what he could see, it showed all the markings of a virus developed in a lab. That was the opinion of Dr. James Redfield, director at the CDC as well, and they were both shut out. Dr. Luc Montagnier, Nobel Prize winner for identifying HIV, the virus that causes AIDS, he was shut out. Dr. James Redfield, director at the CDC, shut out. Anthony Fauci, I am the science. What I say goes. Forget the science, forget discussion, forget questioning. This is now authoritarian fascist style dictate. That's Anthony Fauci. Whale oil is saying, sadly, lab leak is merely a psyop needed to protect the pseudoscience discipline of virology. There are a lot of people who believe that viruses in of themselves don't exist. I do not fall into that camp. And the reason is because I had chickenpox. What happened was my sister got chickenpox, then I got chickenpox. And you would see it. Parents would have chickenpox parties. So something's moving around. One kid gets chickenpox, so you put all the other kids around. They used to have these back in the day, chickenpox parties, childhood disease, measles, mumps, rubella. And so it was not an uncommon practice in generations past before the advent of vaccines for parents to willingly, voluntarily expose healthy children to something like measles or chickenpox so that they could get it over with. And actually, Anthony Fauci was on a mainstream media broadcast saying that prior infection, that is the best form of vaccination, prior infection. The host was asking, I have a family member or a friend who's had the flu. Do they need the flu vaccine? And Anthony Fauci, during the interview, he said, if they genuinely had the flu, if they actually had the flu, then they do not need to have the flu shot because they have received the best form of vaccination prior infection. That's why I don't need the vaccine. I'm 99.9% sure I was sick with COVID in February of 2022. So I've been vaccinated. Uh, let's see. I missed one. Max saying that they never will admit they were wrong. No. Uh, And that sadly is part of politics. Politicians never want to admit they're wrong, and everything is political in today's world, including medical science. So medical science plays the political game, and they will never admit they were wrong because it's not about science, it's about politics. So they're not going to admit they were wrong. They're going to say the science evolved, our understanding evolved based on what we knew at the time when we did these heinously horrible things to people. That was the right decision to make at the time, given what we knew then. Well, why? What about the individuals who said what you were doing was wrong at the time? They were right. Um, Max is saying federal court found there was no emergency justifying the seizure of bank accounts. Oh, yeah, the Ottawa trucker convoy protest when our federal government in Ottawa, people kicking in 5, 10, 50, 100, whatever dollars into I think it was a GoFundMe, kicking it in to support the trucker convoy protest. those individuals, many of them, had their bank accounts seized. And Max is highlighting that the federal court, and that's what they found that there was no emergency justifying that, but they were playing on the fear that the population had. God bless those truckers. We should have a national holiday for them every February, celebrating the fact that, simple truckers, simple hardworking Canadian men and women stood up against government overreach, tyrannical, draconian measures being introduced. And they stood up and they rescued all of Canadians, even those who were stupidly going along with all the insanity. They rescued them from it, and we've gotten back to a semblance of normality in this country. Um, Eat Me is writing that, oh hell, the Chinese are currently hiding the count of their own population. China Observer in YouTube publishes this on a weekly basis. They will never admit to anything. Um, and yes, Eat Me, whale oil is here. So you should be able to see him. Whale oil goes on to write something, quote, moving around would be a bacteria instead of a boogeyman virus. Whether it's bacterial or viral, I don't have a science. There's something going around, bacterial, viral, whatever. All I know is that so whether chickenpox is transmitted bacterially or virally, when I was a kid, I got it from my sister. Call it whatever you want. And now it's true that I never see any kids getting chickenpox anymore. And that, my understanding, that's the way a vaccine is supposed to work. I just found recently, I found out where I'd stashed it, my immunization record with the forces. Immunization, that's what we used to call vaccines. Call it a vaccine or an immunization. What does immunization mean? Immune. You are immune. You do not get it. If you're immune from prosecution, then you don't get prosecuted. If you're immune from infection, you don't get infected. And I've had MMR, measles, mumps, rubella, and polio. And I don't know anybody, myself included, who's been immunized against measles, mumps, rubella, or polio who have gotten any of those diseases. However, everyone I know who got the COVID jabs has gotten COVID. So it's not an immunization. It provides no immunity. They changed the definition of what a vaccine is. We used to think of them as immunizations. Now they're presented as more of a therapeutic. Well, you won't get as sick. And if you get in hospital, well, you won't die. And if you die, well, then you get to go to heaven. Who knows? Um, Max is writing, if you click where it says, oh yes, change to live chat, just in case. And Eat Me realized it is the top chat thing. You see that, whale? Your comments, you're being filtered out by the YouTube algorithms. Craziness. And now Eat Me and everyone can see each other. Um, and Max is saying that science has become unfalsifiable. You cannot render anything false anymore. Even if you get it, they'll just say it was less severe than it would have been, even though it's impossible to know that. I got it February 2022. I was at a local pizza place grabbing a pie or two, Little Caesars here in town. Not a plug, but I like their pizza. Kathy, I know the lady who owns it, small town. Anyway, what happened? So February 22, I get it. And then a few months later, might have been probably was April, May, I was at Little Caesars and I saw a gentleman, Barry, who I used to go to church with, and he's outside wearing a mask. Now, sadly, Barry's wife passed away. I feel very sorry for this guy. She suffered a massive aneurysm, and it caused enormous health difficulties over the ensuing time after, and eventually she passed. It wasn't immediate. And What caused her to have the aneurysm? I have no idea. Anyway, Barry was wearing a mask outside, and I asked him, "Are you okay, Barry?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, I just had COVID. Oh, it was horrible. I just about died." And they said, "Well, thank goodness I had the vaccine. Oh, it would have killed me." And I said, "Yeah, I had it back in February myself." And he goes, "Oh yeah, it was horrible, wasn't it?" And I said, "No, actually, it was a 2-day nothing burger. I've had worse colds." And he said, "Oh yeah, but that's because you had the vaccine." And I said, "Actually, no, Barry, I didn't get the vaccine." And his eyebrows just about shot off his head because I just blew what, you know, it was a nothing burger for me. Uh, but what do I know? What do I know? So Max is saying that science has become unfalsifiable. Even if you get it, they just say, "Oh well, it would have been worse." Like Barry there, he got sick as a dog apparently, and so sick he thought he was going to die, but he didn't die. So it's the reason he didn't die. He's convinced. They told him it's because of he rolled up his sleeves or sleeve. Uh, and Whale is saying that interesting. I've noticed that if you use the V word and the F word in the same sentence with substantiation with substantive info, that it gets deleted. No surprise. Uh, and then Max has a reminder. Trudeau called a snap election in the middle, September of 2021. Uh, what they were calling at the time, according to Max, he's recalling that it was during the so-called third wave, the deadly third wave. That was one thing, the deadly coronavirus, the deadly coronavirus, that's all you kept hearing on the news. Government officials were going to do everything needed to protect Canadians, Ontarians, the people of Toronto from the deadly coronavirus. Have you heard about the coronavirus? Oh, yeah, it's deadly. Bum, 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 bum. Terrifying news from Bob Cage in Ontario as the tsunami of death continues. Like, what? Tsunami of death? The hyperbole that they used to sell this and to drive emotional response was over the top. Uh, and Eat Me is writing that aneurysms are caused typically by blood clots. Like I say, but what causes blood clots? I don't know. I'm not even going to go there. I think everyone knows my opinions already. The reason ultimately, I was getting screamed at to get it. And I said, look, I'm going to wait at least 6 months to a year. And based on my observations, I might get it, I might not. And then that woman, Barry's wife, I knew about that. I knew about Mark, a local counselor in Brighton here, who had a massive, huge heart attack. My brother in law, 38 years of age, 6 foot tall, 180 pounds, incredibly fit and healthy. He had a heart attack. I had two family members who suffered strokes. I had another friend, John, suffered in and around a little younger than me. He also suffered a massive stroke. I had two colleagues at work pass away. Kevin passed away from a massive heart attack. They found him dead in his apartment. Another guy I worked with at that radar station, I got called about this um, by a sergeant of mine, wanted to give me a heads up to let me know that these two guys had died recently. And it went on and on. So many people around me now. Could I definitively say, with my non-scientific, non-medical background, could I definitively say correlation, causation? No, I cannot. But there were simply too many serious adverse health events being experienced in my little circle among people who I all knew had complied that very quickly I went, well, I ain't getting this thing. No way, no how. And man, it cost me. There are people I still don't talk to because it broke the relationship because I was a bad person in their eyes. You're not coming over to my house. You're not coming over here and kill us all. I heard that from family members. disgusting. But, I always wondered how it was in 1930s, 40s Germany, how people could lose their humanity so easily. And now I understand the reason. It's because a pervasive media machine, propaganda machine, media, government, health officials inundating the population with, emotion-driven propaganda scares them. They lose all the ability. You lose your I can't even talk anymore. Humanity. It's gone. Let me read what's being written. Whale oil. Dr. Tom Cowan's video on Wednesdays on a station that rhymes with Bumble addresses the viral myth. What I'll give it a look. You've suggested videos to me before. I'll give that one a look too. One thing I noticed is Dr. Michael Yeadon, Yeadon, former vice president at Pfizer, one of their chief science officers, and he started his own biotech, and then he sold that biotech to Novartis for what Forbes magazine reckoned that the sale price was in and around $1 billion US. So this guy is brilliant, obviously. Chief science officer at Pfizer, former vice president of that company, creates his own biotech, sells it to Novartis, another huge pharmaceutical company, and he shares that opinion, whale oil, with respect to virus, and he shares that opinion. So it's above my pay grade, at any rate. And Eat Me is writing that the snap election from September in 2021 was launched because they were under investigation for corruption. The ex-speaker chairman of the House, or the ex-speaker of the House, Rota, was leading the investigation. I don't recall that. I always just figured Trudeau and Doug Ford at the time as well both went to the polls early because, under the guise of an emergency, people are scared and they look to authority figures, and everyone was looking for Trudeau and Doug Ford to save us from the deadly coronavirus. So they thought they could capitalize on it politically. That was always my take. Max is writing, I can't believe how bad the corruption was. Also appointed that special rapporteur, that was Johnson, to investigate themselves. And that was Johnson, former Governor General of Canada, who I shook his hand once at the airport in Quebec City going on an exercise. David Johnson. And an old family friend of the Trudeau family, gone on vacation with them, and that's the guy he tapped to do the investigation into his government. My family friend is going to investigate the government. And Eat Me had forgotten about that. Oh, yeah, David Johnson. Appointed by Harper as the Governor General, but it showed Harper. Who did he appoint as Governor General? He appointed a family friend of the Trudeau family. So that showed that he wasn't playing favoritism, nepotism, wasn't rewarding his cronies. No one could accuse Harper of appointing someone friendly, conflict of interest. Now with Harper, Harper goes, and who does he appoint as Governor General? A family friend of the Trudeau family. Who does Trudeau appoint to investigate his own government? That same family friend. Ridiculous. At any rate, I've gone on for over an hour. Probably will be doing another live stream tomorrow, so you're welcome to jump on to that. And we'll see where things go. Max is bringing up SNC-Lavalin and the ethics violations that they're just the tip of the, what we found out about SNC-Lavalin thanks to Jody Wilson-Raybould, Canada's, at the time, the Attorney General, and the Trudeau and his office were pressuring Jody Wilson-Raybould to give SNC-Lavalin what they called a deferred prosecutorial agreement, DFA, deferred prosecutorial agreement, basically a plea bargain. They wanted the Trudeau wanted Jody Wilson-Raybould to offer SNC-Lavalin a deal, pay a small little fine, and no admission of guilt, no conviction, everything stays the same. And Jody Wilson-Raybould refused. She said, no, we're prosecuting this case. And so Justin Trudeau fired her. She is the one woman, if she ran for the Liberal Party as their leader and got elected leader of the party, I would consider strongly voting for a Liberal Party led by Jody Wilson-Raybould. And anyway, happy Friday, all. It's no longer the 4th of July, but any Americans who tune in, congratulations. We'll talk tomorrow about the big, beautiful bill about the fact that Americans don't have to pay taxes anymore on overtime or tips. And we'll talk about all the quote unquote experts who are claiming that the big, beautiful bill is going to balloon the US federal deficit. Are they going to be right? We don't know. And we've seen the experts be wrong, whether it's climate science experts, whether it's medical experts. So are the economic experts going to be wrong? And just reading the last few. I wondered too. Thank you, Max, for the nice comment. I feel like I'm losing some of my mental acuity. I'm getting tired. I'm getting older. But thanks for that. I appreciate it. And Eat Me is writing that Juno News broke out today that CISC filed a document that Chinese corruption and infiltration was active under Mulroney. That wouldn't surprise me. I don't know what CISC stands for. Is that are you talking about Canadian CSIS, Canadian Intelligence and Security Service? Yeah, CSIS. I think you got the acronym a little wrong. I can't even remember it now. Canadian Intelligence and Security Service is the way I remember it. And then Eat Me is going on to say that we've been infiltrated since 1988, if not before that. And yeah, I got it. So yeah, CSIS would not surprise me anyway. God bless. We'll talk to you all later. Thank you everyone for showing up. Sorry for the unscheduled nature, but yes, tomorrow live stream. I'm having to do them later now because things don't calm down in this house until after 11. So it's going to be late, 10:45, 11, 11:15, sometime around there. God bless. Thanks for watching and like, subscribe, share, all that stuff. Thanks. Talk to you tomorrow. Appreciate it. Good night.